Next, let's try to convert a slightly more complicated report. You can see I have my signed group report here. There are two groups of signed tags I'm looking at. You can show group 1 or change the selected group property on the report viewer component to look at group 2 instead. There's also a date range component here that allows us to select a different date range. The chart and table inside of the report are both being driven by this data property here, which if you look at the binding icon, is just a tag history binding with a little bit of indirection. So let's attempt to convert this report. I'll click OK. We'll right-click on the report viewer component and select Convert. And of course, we want to convert this legacy embedded report into a project level report object, so we'll click OK. We'll give this a new name. How about Sign Group? And we see a message saying the report converted successfully. Although there appears to be a slight problem. You'll note that the chart's empty. If we poke around a little bit, put the design into preview mode, we can still switch between groups just fine. And it looks like the date range selector is still working. Now, as I mentioned previously, that data property is what was populating the chart as well as the table. The table seems to be working, so there might be some sort of problem with the chart. So let's see if we can fix that. We'll want to start by looking at the report in our report section here. So I'll come up to the project browser. We'll expand reports, and we'll open up our sign group report that we just created or converted to. If we take a look at the preview panel, you'll see we're getting a bunch of data collection errors. As we mentioned in the Converting Legacy Reports video, parameters are not provided with a default value. It's a good idea to provide default values to our parameters, as well as convert our dataset parameters into data sources that the report can use. So I'll head over to my data panel, and we'll start with the data parameter. Now, we just used a tag history binding on our previous report, so there's no reason we shouldn't do that right now. So I'll delete the data parameter, and we'll add a new tag historian query. So I'll click on the plus icon, and we'll select a tag historian query. Just to be consistent, I'll change the data key name to data, like we had the parameter not too long ago. And let's go ahead and find our historical tags. So I know they're in my DB provider up here. We'll go to agent, report provider into group 1, and there are my sign tags. So I'll just select all of my sign tags and drag them over to the selected historical tags table. Now we need to provide some indirection here. So if I expand the tag path here, this group 1 needs to be able to switch between group 1 and group 2. And previously, that was the job of this selected group parameter. So let's go ahead and do that right now. I'll come over here and we'll modify the tag path. Change from group 1 to a reference to selected group with curly braces around it. And we'll go ahead and just copy what I typed in there, including the rest of the beginning of the path. We'll apply it to each tag down below. And now the tag path can be based off of that parameter, that selected group. Not quite done with our query here though, as we should update the start date and end date bindings. We don't have a start date and an end date parameter created, but we do have the report end date and report start date. So let's just use those. So I'll come to my start date binding, click on the magnifying glass here, and we'll select report start date. Click OK, and we'll do the same for the end date binding, except of course look at the report end date parameter. And we don't have to make any other changes to our query here. So let's take a look at our parameters next. We'll come up to selected group. And let's just make sure that this is always by default looking at group 1. Report end date should be easy enough. We can just use the now expression function. Lastly, let's give a value to report start date. Here we can use date arithmetic. We'll use now as the starting value. We'll say, how about an hour ago is what this should resolve to. And let's see this in action. If we head over to the preview panel again, we see that the data collection warnings are gone. We have our table back. We also have our group and dates listed. Though, of course, the chart's still broken. We haven't really addressed that yet. So we'll do that next. We'll head to the design panel. I'll go ahead and zoom in here just a little bit. And let's take a look at the chart. So I'll double click on my chart. And right away, once we have the chart selected, we can see what the problem here is. Looks like there's no data key passed into the chart. We can change that. We'll click on the little magnifying glass next to data key. Make sure data is selected. Click OK. One other problem I'm seeing, though, is that our pens are labeled pen 1, 2, and 3, when it'd be nice if we're showing sign 0, sign 1, and sign 2. So let's go ahead and change our pen names as well. Sign 0, sign 1, and there we are. With those changes made, we can go back to the preview panel. And it looks like our chart's working. If we head back to our window, it appears to be working here as well. And if we make sure we have our 7.8 reports viewer selected, we scroll down, you'll see there's no longer a data parameter. But remember, that's because we deleted it and we turned into a data source, but that's intended. So you can see after converting a report, sometimes you may have to go and take a look at some of the parameters and make sure everything's working correctly. If you have a report that keeps failing to convert, please contact our support department. This way we can make changes and improvements to the conversion process.